Welcome to this mini seascape painting. I'm using the Hahnemuhle Cornwall paper, 8 by 10.5 centimeters, so it's really small. It's a rough surface and it's quite thick. It's 450 grams and it's on a little mini block. I've had it years ago. I found it in my plan chest when I was looking for some other watercolour paper, and the little paint box I bought years ago from the SAA. A full list of the materials I'm using in this tutorial, along with colours and alternatives, can be found in the description below this video. Just click show more or the down arrow. So I'm starting out with the twig and I'm just dipping it into some of the dark colours here just to do a little sketch outline. So you could use something like Paynes grey, watered down, and it just gets you started. It's nice and loose. It'll be a great way of actually you could actually do, if you're on holiday, you could actually paint your own postcards. So what I'm doing here is I'm just sort of sketching in some rocks. Now this is all from my imagination. I find sometimes painting my imagination takes all the pressure off and I can just experiment, while sometimes if you're using a photograph you can actually get quite tight, and this way you can just experiment, especially in a little watercolour pad like this. So I'm just squiggling some lines for the sea here, still using this sort of watered down dark. What I'm doing now is I'm just wetting the sky with my size 10 round brush, just with some clean water down to the horizon. And I'm going to mix up a little bit of Cobalt Blue. You can use Ultramarine, and I'm just sort of painting a little bit of a darker blue at the top. You can see the texture of that Cornwall paper. It's gorgeous. I've added a little bit of lavender. I think I had a little bit of lavender left in my palette, but not to worry. This is a touch of ultramarine. I'm just painting it at the top there, wet into wet. And I'm just getting a touch of Prussian blue now, or it may be Phthalo turquoise actually, can't remember. I squeezed this in a while ago, and I've added a touch of violet. You could use Paynes grey. Look at that, it's just lovely. I'm just sort of painting this quite creamy paint with the tip of my brush for some land in the distance, and letting some of the paint run up into the sky, so it almost looks like trees. And it's lovely the way watercolour does this. As you can see, I've sort of mixed up a really dark colour there, and I've rinsed my brush, and I'm just using sort of a watered down brush here to pull some of that dark away from that land to paint the sea with. And I'm just sort of diluting my brush again, wetting the sort of central part of the water here, just really sort of taking my time, getting a little bit more of that phthalo turquoise. You can use Prussian blue, and a touch of the violet, and just painting this sort of wet into wet here, and just kind of following the marks that I made earlier with the twig. And just to say about the twig, it's just a twig from the garden sharpened with a pencil sharpener, and it's great for sketching with. So I'm just again painting wet into wet, added a touch of pink there as well, and just painting this almost a violet colour there, and just painting this all wet into wet. And I'm just waiting to see what happens. And it's so freeing up painting like this. So this is a damp brush just with water, and just blending and softening those edges there, adding a little bit more blue, so sort of painting up to the rocks there, adding a touch of Cobalt Blue and a little bit of that lavender. Don't worry if you don't have the lavender. And actually I'd really encourage you to sort of just have a play like I'm doing here. It can be similar sort of subject matter, but just go with the flow. Use your favourite colours. So I'm just wetting around the rock area, still using the same brush, and I've dipped my brush into a little bit of burnt sienna here, and I'm going to paint the rocks with some burnt sienna sort of at the bottom part of the rocks there. So leaving the top part white with the white of the paper, and this is wet on dry. So I'm getting a pinch of violet and I'm mixing that with the burnt sienna, about 50-50, so it makes a really dark, delicious brown. and I'm painting this damp into damp, really, right at the bottom part of the rocks there, leaving the burnt sienna in the middle and then the white of the paper at the top. Some of the sea has crept over on those rocks on the right, but not to worry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little bit of quinacridone gold. You can use raw sienna or a little bit of yellow ochre, and I'm painting this lovely golden sort of earthy yellow sort of on the sort of sandy part of the beach there and through the gaps of the rocks as well. So this is a lovely colour. It's a cobalt turquoise light, but you can use cerulean if you don't have this colour, so not to worry, or another blue. Just have fun with it. And I'm just painting this kind of wet into damp, and sometimes when you paint wet into damp, that's the paint's not as wet now, and I'm putting wet paint into it, you get backruns, and I kind of want a background there. I might not get one, but it's quite nice to experiment, as I said earlier, just to have fun with it. And this is a little bit more of that phthalo turquoise, and I'm actually painting that sort of wet into damp, again experimenting, seeing what happens. It might definitely will create some darks, but some textures as well. So just drizzling that at the bottom part of the rocks and just watching how that sort of paint spreads out as well. And just having fun with it, just seeing what happens. I love those sort of trees in the distance as well now, created by that sort of run of paint in the sky. I'm sprinkling on some ordinary table salt onto the damp paint, and what that should do is absorb some of the paint, and you'll get some lovely sort of light textured effects once it dries. So allow it to work before you dry off your painting. So I'm using some white gouache. You can use white watercolour or white acrylic. I'm masking out my painting with some paper towels. You saw there I've torn the paper towel. You get some nice natural edges that way. I've slightly watered down the gouache enough so I can spatter. So I'm using my size 2 brush, and I'm spattering really in this sort of central part of the sea, like as a big wave and surf there, and really giving it a good spatter to create some light there. I've also decided to spatter the rocks as well, so I'm covering the rest of the painting again and just giving it a spatter in the foreground, and it creates a really nice effect. Here's a close-up of the painting there, and I think the salt is starting to work as well. So I'm going to allow my painting to dry naturally, and once the painting is dry, I'm just going to give you a little close-up here. As you can see, there's some lovely textures created by the salt and the back run of that phthalo turquoise as well. I love all the textures in the water and the texture of the paper in the sky as well. I thought it'd be quite nice just to add a few birds as well. So I'm using my size 4 brush, mixed up the burnt sienna and the violet again, and I'm just painting the letter V, actually, sort of some slightly different angles than the other, a little smaller one in the distance as well, to create some depth. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it inspires you to get your watercolours out and maybe just paint on a small scale to take the pressure off, and also to paint from your imagination. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please put them in the comments section below. If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. And for those of you that would like to learn more about watercolour painting, why not check out my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.